Hello, the Pioneer viewers. How are you doing? I hope you're healthy and well. As the Pioneer team, we continue to share our report on the Russia-Ukraine war with you. Next, we will talk about the new tactic and strategies of the Ukrainian armed forces on the front line. As it is known, the front line is immobile, and while this mobility increases day by day, we're faced with new developments every day. The operations carried out by the Ukrainian armed forces have worn out the Russian armed forces considerably. Therefore, we can say that the Russian armed forces are trying to copy the Ukrainian armed forces. However, the Ukrainian armed forces don't give this opportunity. With the Russian armed forces trying new Ukrainian tactics, the Ukrainian armed forces are trying to prevent the Russian army from imitating the Ukrainian army by applying different tactics. This strategy is quite successful, and in the past days, the 47th Brigade of the Ukrainian armed forces have achieved significant success by applying such a tactic. So, what are the latest developments related to this operation? Let's take a look at developments together. As the Pioneer team, we continue to prepare our reports on Russia-Ukraine war for you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so that you don't miss our daily reports. You can also support me and my team by using the super thanks button below the videos. Let's start if you are ready, the Pioneer reports. The fierce fighting between Russia and Ukraine continues along the entire front line. Since the first day of the war, both sides have fought intensely, and it's taught both sides a lot. As a matter of fact, Russia has not learned much, because in the learning process, one learns what the mistakes of the past have led to, and that these mistakes should not be repaired. However, the Russian army made the same mistakes again and again, and it is still continuing to do so. So the Ukrainian army, on the other hand, continues to write epics on the front line with the strategic and strategies it had developed. In recent days, unmanned aerial vehicles witnessed incredible images at one of the points where the intense struggles took place between the Ukrainian armed forces and the Russian armed forces. So the Russian armed forces don't have a tactical creator or units that successfully implement the tactics created. This causes the Russian armed forces to face heavy losses on the front line. However, the Ukrainian armed forces have an advantage in this regard. The Russian armed forces are now imitating the Ukrainian armed forces in order to achieve success on the front line. You've not heard it wrong, yeah. Russian soldiers are trying to achieve successes by imitating Ukrainian soldiers, I repeat. According to the gathering moments of the Ukrainian soldiers, Russian soldiers also gather. And according to the dispersal movement of the Ukrainian soldiers, Russian soldiers also disperse. So in other words, the Russian armed forces are again after something that does not belong to them. So, however, the Ukrainian armed forces understood this tactic of the Russian armed forces and took action, and the Ukrainian soldiers lured the Russian soldiers who imitated them into the big trap. As I've mentioned, the Russian soldiers were imitating the positions and movements of the Ukrainian soldiers, and during this imitation, Ukrainian soldiers realized that the situation and called for the reinforcements behind their positions. While doing this, the Ukrainian soldiers were constantly changing their positions and trying to detect the movements of the Russian soldiers. Meanwhile, the Russian soldiers continued to move according to the movements of the Ukrainian soldiers. The 47th Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian armed forces began to withdraw. They were retreating, and sometimes in groups of 2 or 3, sometimes in the large groups, clashing with the Russian troops. Meanwhile, the Russian troops were acting like Ukrainian soldiers. However, the Ukrainian 47th Mechanized Brigade had a set big trap, and the Russian troops thought that the Ukrainian troops had been forced to retreat. Therefore, they moved forward, taking positions and grouping according to the positions of the Ukrainian soldiers. However, they were unaware of the trap waiting behind them. While advancing in this way, the Russian soldiers fell into a trap set by the Ukrainian soldiers, and by this time, the 47th Mechanized Brigade had surrendered to the Russian soldiers. Moreover, by the time of the demolition operation began, and the Russian soldiers had been made to move in the groups of 2 or 3. The Russian soldiers were now caught between 3 fires. Moreover, the Ukrainian soldiers did not give the Russian soldiers the opportunity to regroup. Therefore, the Russian troops were only in small units of the 2 or 3 men each. According to reports during the operation here, the 47th Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian armed forces managed to destroy a large number of Russian soldiers. There is also information published by local sources that a large number of Russian servicemen were taken prisoners. Many of our sources in the region report that the units of the Russian armed forces often suffer losses due to the similar tactical shortcomings. And the Ukrainian armed forces, on the other hand, are achieving significant successes thanks to the tactically well-trained and intelligent commanders. Of course, it is important to follow the example of the opponent and imitate his successes. However, imitation alone does not bring any success because the imitated feature is already well known by the opponent. Therefore, the opponent knows the weaknesses of this feature closely. In such cases, it uses these weaknesses, and this is what the Russian armed forces don't understand. The units of the Russian armed forces are acting only on the basis of the successes of the tactics of the Ukrainian armed forces. However, the main issue is the production, implementation, and reshaping of these tactics according to the changing circumstances. In this process, the Russian armed forces prefer only copying, and copying has not brought any success to the Russian armed forces so far. So I'll also discuss the views of the military experts on this issue. In many of our previous reports, I've included the reports of the military experts and the strategists. So these reports give us the opportunity to make predictions for the future of the war. One of the military experts who made statements on this subject made the following statements on the subject. So there is a great tactical deficiency in the units of the Russian armed forces, and the Russian soldiers seems to be alone during the conflict, because the Russian commanders usually tell the Russian soldiers to go. In no other way do the Russian commanders appear there. In other words, the Russian soldiers have the initiative on the front line to a large extent. However, it should not be forgotten that the inexperience of the Russian soldiers in such a situation could lead to a major disaster for the Russian army. Although the Russian war leadership often ignores such facts, this reality does not change. It was also known that the Ukrainian troops were capable of carrying out such attacks, because the Ukrainian army is currently on the defensives, and the defending side is more capable of the traps and deceptions, and this is one of the facts that the Russian military overlooked. So, what do you think? How important and what important do you think the tactical competence of the Ukrainian soldiers has for the war? And how do you evaluate the tactics of the Ukrainian soldiers? What do you think is the reason for the incompetence of the Russian soldiers? And let me know in the comments, because I care about your comments.